Good evening and welcome to all of you from Sunatra Family Eye Care Center to our 13th weekly episode of Facebook Live Patient Education Series. Last week, we discussed about diabetes and its effects on the eyes. That was mainly to commemorate World Diabetes Day, which is celebrated every year on November 14th. Diabetes, as we discussed the other day, is an ever-increasing health issue around the globe. It is a vast subject in itself and has multiple facets to it. Today, we shall talk to you about another facet, lifestyle and nutritional issues related to diabetes. And for this, we have with us a multi-talented, dynamic young physician friend of mine, Dr. Parikshit Bhattacharya, who firmly believes that prevention is preferable to cure, and also that some so-called chronic diseases need not linger with us for life. After his medical graduation in 2004, Dr. Bhattacharya practiced conventional medicine of prescribing drugs for 10 long years until 2014, when he forayed into full-time practice of lifestyle and functional medicine. Dr. Bhattacharya believes that being healthy is way more important in life than anything else. With this in mind, he has founded Healthy RX Clinic with a vision towards a healthier world. He has also been available at our center on some days of the week for offering consultations to our patients who have diabetes and or other chronic systemic illnesses. With his philosophy of let's prescribe health and not pills, Dr. Parikshit Bhattacharya has been successful in reversing diabetes and other chronic diseases in several of our patients over the past few years. Hi, Parikshit. Good to
Hi.
have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Parikshit,
Okay.
I'll just
Tell me.
ask you to begin with at the starting এ যে এই যে এখন আমাদের প্যান্ডেমিক চলছে কোভিড প্যান্ডেমিক what is more worrisome, the COVID pandemic or diabetes and lifestyle diseases?
Yeah, great question. Yes, COVID has been a bother for all of us. At the same time, we have been hearing, like, not only us medical professionals, but I know everyone by now has realized that, if you have a comorbidity, you are going to suffer or very likely suffer more than a normal healthy person. So if you look at the larger picture, I really feel that the pandemic is more about poor metabolic health. And that poor metabolic health has aggravated this COVID scenario. So yes, I would elaborate on that more as we go through the discussion today.
I think you're right. I think you're quite right. We know that COVID affects more or is manifested more in people who have hypertension and diabetes. Yeah, carry on. Do you have a slide presentation by which you want to talk?
Yes, I'll get to that. Let me just open the slide.
Great. Wonderful.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yes, I have to. Yeah, it's already added. So
Okay.
yes, we can see.
Let me just move to the first slide. Okay. So today's discussion, lifestyle and nutrition in diabetes. So thanks for the suggestion. Otherwise, it probably would not have crossed my mind to go ahead with this kind of a talk. So এখন pandemic is something আমরা community medicine এ পড়েছি অনেক বছর আগে. And then I think most of us have not really had to bother about it because in the last many years we have not dealt with the scenario. So now everyone knows what pandemic is, maybe not the actual definition, but yes, pandemic is synonymous with COVID, what is happening across the world. So যেটা আমি এক্ষুনি বললাম, আমার strong belief হচ্ছে this virus is actually taking advantage of something more sinister. So the real pandemic, in my opinion, is what you see. These are basically a host of chronic diseases which have, like, engulfed planet Earth. এখন যেটা এক্ষুনি বললাম, all of us know that যাদের health খারাপ তাদের COVID বেশি বাজেভাবে affect করছে. So I feel we have to deal with this first. If we can make a healthier population, I feel, yes, viruses will still affect us, but we will be more immune at handling them. ঠিক আছে?
Very well said.
So this is more to do with poor metabolic health. Now, I'm not saying that people can totally prevent some chronic diseases, but if the metabolic health is improved, and metabolic health is a very large subject in itself, but what I try to say when I talk about metabolic health is, if it's not just metabolism, if your hormones, your other bodily functions are all working fine, তাহলে you can prevent metabolic diseases or chronic diseases. এখন chronic কথাটা কেন এসছে? Chronic কথাটা usually 3 to 6 months and beyond কোনো illness থাকলে it is termed as chronic. But this is just touching upon something related to modern medicine. I've always believed, I tell my patients, I tell my doctor colleagues, I feel that modern medicine is brilliant and path-breaking in many spheres, be it surgeries, be it vaccines, be it antibiotics. এগুলো না থাকলে কিন্তু প্রচুর মানুষে মারা যেত. But I just feel it has some drawbacks as far as chronic diseases is concerned. The reason being, if I have a disease, I go to a doctor, I expect a cure. You'll see for a chronic disease, most chronic diseases, there is no cure. The patient is given a medicine, the disease is kept under control, at bay, under check, but it does not cure the condition. So that is why I take this slightly not so conventional approach to try and reverse the chronic disease by dealing with the root cause. So here, I just feel the real pandemic is the poor metabolic health, and this COVID virus is simply taking advantage of this. Okay, now this slide talks about the most common chronic conditions in adult, and I'm sure all of you must be aware with these diseases: blood pressure, dyslipidemia, joint pain, arthritis, heart disease, and of course diabetes. Diabetes, you can see, is a huge 27%. So I'm going to elaborate primarily about diabetes today. No issues we can talk about maybe at some other point of time. Okay. According to the Center of Disease Control, 75% of all chronic diseases is caused by modifiable poor lifestyle habits. So we're going to jump into lifestyle very soon. Okay? So what is lifestyle? Lifestyle talks about nutrition. In my opinion, as far as chronic disease is concerned, nutrition is very important, the most important probably. Exercise, bad habits like smoking or alcohol, stress management, sleep, and being happy. Healthy relationship means being at peace, stress-free, and happy. So ajke we are going to talk primarily about nutrition. Okay. So if you see here, the proportion of diseases caused globally by key causes of ill health. Poor diet is the primary factor responsible. Other things do factor, but the poor diet is a reason for so many problems. I really have to stress on poor diet.
Yeah, I'm interrupting you. Poor diet e tumi pastry ছবি দিয়েছো কেন সেটা নিশ্চয়ই পরে বুঝিয়ে দেবে.
I've got a lot to talk about sweets, so that's going to be very interesting when we get there. Okay. So now coming to, I'm going to talk primarily about India. Yes, the problem is a worldwide issue, but I just feel we should talk about it because most of our viewers are from India probably, or Indians. So the Indian lifestyle problem, this is alarming. Every 12th Indian currently is diabetic, and every 7th is pre-diabetic. 61% of all deaths in India are linked to lifestyle or non-communicable diseases, and almost 76% of India is overfat. Overfat and mane hocche বাইরে থেকে মোটা হয়তো দেখে মনে হবে না, but they have a lot of fat inside their body, visceral fat around their organs, which actually is metabolically more unhealthy. And nearly 2.8 million Indians die of heart disease annually, and there are 1.8 million new cancer cases every year. So this is like crazy. Okay, now I'm jumping right into the topic because I have a lot of slides and we have to move through them very quickly before everyone gets bored. So diabetes versus nutrition. First of all, আমরা ডাক্তারি পড়েছি, আমাদের MBBS কোর্সই ছিল প্রায় 5.5-6 বছর। আমাদের বোধহয় 23-24টা সাবজেক্ট ছিল, আমাদের হার্ডলি কোনো এডুকেশন দেওয়া হয়েছে অন নিউট্রিশন. So doctors are not supposed to know much about nutrition. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So whatever I had to learn was on my own after passing my medical studies. So here, doctors are brilliantly trained for prescribing medicines, as I said earlier, doing surgeries, doing a lot of other things which help the planet as such. But this lack of respect for the science of nutrition has actually created a global health disaster. So it beats me why, like, do you have any idea why we were never taught nutrition, or even till this date, why we were never taught nutrition?
Yeah, there are a lot of issues like that in our curriculum which are deficient, which needs a change. Yes, we should be taught more about prevention rather than curing. True, I agree with you.
Okay, so now some quick common nutritional myths everyone will be able to relate to. Eat multiple small meals a day. সবাই বলে তাতে metabolic rate বাড়ে, you get healthier, you lose weight. All calories are the same. All calories বলতে একটা, say for example, একটা cupcake or chocolate brownie, okay, and say a small piece of chicken. They may have the same calories, but we all know how differently they affect your body. You can have 5 pieces of chicken and you know what will happen at the end of 1 month. You can have 5 pastries every day. They may have the same calories. So it's not a calorie issue here. That's what I want to talk about. Okay, too much butter, ghee, meat, egg, these are all harmful. এগুলো আমাদের arteries clog করে দেবে.
That's a myth. That's a myth.
হ্যাঁ, কি বলছেন?
That's a myth, meaning that is not true, right?
These are all myths. I'll just touch upon them later on. Okay, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. এটা আমরা ছোটবেলা থেকে শুনে এসেছি, আমাদের মা বাবারাও শুনে এসেছে. So that's the way, generation after generation has been eating. So a breakfast specific, I have an interesting slide. We'll come to that later. Okay, to lose weight, eat less and exercise more. So this is what the world wants you to believe. Again, I'll tell you why this is not as correct as it may sound. Vegetable oils and grains are healthy for the heart. So these are some myths. Now let's jump into exactly what is happening. Okay. Just a minute. Something happened. Remind. A minute. Achha. Sorry, we are a tiny glitch. I'm back again. Okay, so medicine, Dietary, this health sector, it is not healthcare in my opinion. Food is healthcare. Medicine is actually sick care. So we call it healthcare. Yes, that's the in word everywhere. But medicine is actually treating sick people. It's not healthcare. So we have to really realize this. Hippocrates is the father of modern medicine. You can see the date there, 460 BC. তখনকার দিনে he had said something as valuable as this: let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So in a way he kind of meant that খাবারের মাধ্যমে we can heal a lot of medical conditions. So that is what probably I am rediscovering after so many years. And remember, every time আমরা কিছু খাই, when we eat or drink something, you are either feeding disease or fighting. এই কথাগুলো are very important, significant. So আমি যদি একটা কিছু বাজে কিছু খাই, I'm eventually going to feed a disease. If I have something healthy, I'm going to fight a disease or an upcoming disease. And this is just an irony of the modern world. People are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health. Because যে pastry, pizza বিক্রি করতে, they are not at all bothered about health. They actually want you to get unwell. And they are treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. So going back to that আমাদের nutritional teaching that has not been adequate. So in my opinion, diabetes তো দু রকমের হয়, একটা type 1, type 2. Type 1 and type 2 are the basic pathophysiology is very different. But type 2, which is almost 90% of the global burden of diabetes, I feel it's a result of choice and behavior. and it's not genetic. I have a lot of patients, আমাদের কাছে আসে, আপনার কাছেও নিশ্চয়ই প্রচুর patient আসে, diabetic patients. They will have eye disorders, so they're going to come to you. So I'm sure you've heard of this very common line, আমার তো ফ্যামিলিতে ডায়াবেটিস আছে, আমার তো hereditary. So আমি আস্তে আস্তে পেশেন্টদের বলি, the only thing common in your family is your kitchen. So if you can change what comes out of the kitchen, you can probably fix your diabetes. Okay, now I'm getting into a few stats. Say presentation আমি যতটা simple রাখতে পারবো রাখছি, no, not too many technicalities, so everyone enjoys it and gets an understanding. So India has the second highest number of diabetes patients aged 20 to 79 as of 2009, and we're expected to cross China very soon. Now, more alarming is the number of children. Now, just see, states with highest percentage of pre-diabetic children, 5 to 9. So, এই বয়সে pre-diabetic হচ্ছে, বাচ্চাদের কিন্তু কোনো দোষ নেই। আমি বলি মা বাবাদেরও দোষ নেই। It is just lack of awareness. আমরা বাচ্চাদের বলি খা খা খা, ঠিক আছে, সারাক্ষণ শুধু খাইয়েই যাচ্ছি, but we are not realizing what harm we are probably doing by giving the wrong food. And if you see, once the children grow slightly elder, see the percentage. It's all India, it is 10.4%. So 10.4% of an Indian population of adolescents are pre-diabetic. They're just waiting to become a diabetic. Okay, so this is just another quick stat. Pre-diabetic between the ages of 5 to 7, 10.2. If you go higher up, it's 10. So an average of 10 are pre-diabetic, and you can see over a percent of 5 to 7 years children are already diabetic. So that is actually scary. So now look at the economic burden. 90.32 billion rupees spent on diabetes management in 2015. So we all know সুগারের ওষুধ মোটেও সস্তা নয়, যাদের ইনসুলিন নিতে হয় তাদের তো আরোই পকেট খালি হতে থাকবে. So think of what we can think of how we can save people's fortunes just by fixing diabetes. Now coming to the other side of this economic story, medicine sales in India and yes across the world. Look at the growth on the right hand side. If you'll notice that anti-diabetic medicines have the largest growth in sales as per 2019 data. So think of the money they're making. So part of this whole issue is lack of awareness, but a part of it is very commercial in nature. Because if you're not going to become a diabetic, these companies are not going to earn in crores and crores. So in a way, indirectly, everyone wants you to be unwell. There is no money to be made in health. There's only money in sickness. Okay, now this is just a quick view of the different medicines. You can see the সবচেয়ে উপরে হচ্ছে insulin. Insulin earns 436 crores, and this is 2016 data. So you can understand কতটা বেড়ে গেছে. And if you see in this whole list, this is the top selling medicines in the world in India. Janumet, Galvus, Lantus, Glycomet, Mixtat. তো এর মধ্যে 10টার মধ্যে 5টা তো সুগারেরই ওষুধ. So I'm not just trying to improve people's health here. Probably I can save them a lot of money in the long run. So the big question now is type 2 diabetes reversible? Now this is a very controversial question. What do you think?
Prakrit, I have seen it with my own eyes. আমি actually এটা নিয়ে এতটা জানতাম না until I met you, and I have seen you do it for about 5 to 6 of my patients, and they are so happy. Their eye health is so much better now, and they are doing good. Thank you. Carry on.
Okay, so why don't I agree to the conventional treatment for diabetes? Okay, now there's only one reason for type 2 diabetes, and I call it insulin resistance. It's not something which I'm a pioneer of. There are a lot of pioneers across the world. One of the earliest persons to identify this is Dr. Tim Noakes from South Africa. He's a doctor and a professor. So in fact, he was a long distance marathon runner. He became diabetic. I in fact have 4 marathon running patients who are diabetic. So আপনারা তখনই ভাববেন যে ম্যারাথন রানার একটু ডায়াবেটিস হয়। So I'll come to that again later when we talk about exercise. So insulin resistance is the main reason যার জন্য টাইপ 2 ডায়াবেটিস হয়। টাইপ 1 এ কিন্তু ইনসুলিন শরীর তৈরি করতে পারে না। টাইপ 2 তে it is called insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is key. Let me just elaborate slightly. When you have some food, usually it's high carbohydrate food, you cause a spike in blood glucose. যখনই ব্লাড সুগার বাড়ে, the pancreas is programmed to secrete insulin. কেন? ইনসুলিনের কাজ হচ্ছে ব্লাড সুগারটাকে কমানো। Now this এই পর্যন্ত it's normal physiology. It happens to everyone, for a diabetic patient and a non-diabetic patient. But for a diabetic patient, what happens is ওদের because of their lifestyle and their food habits, সারা জীবন 24/7, 365 days a year, their pancreas has been secreting too much insulin day after day. If this happens, the receptor cells start becoming resistant. If I punch someone in the tummy, it's going to hurt them. If I punch them every day in the tummy, আস্তে আস্তে কিন্তু একটা resistance develop করে. Similarly, target organs, the receptor cells become resistant to too much insulin. তার জন্য resistant হয়। তো তার মানে কি হচ্ছে, আমার জন্য আমি একটা রসগোল্লা খাওয়ার পরে আমার যে ইনসুলিন তৈরি হলো, it is sensitive, it is very efficient at doing its job, তাই জন্য আমার ইনসুলিন 30 to 40 minutes এর মধ্যে ব্লাড সুগারকে নামিয়ে দেবে। এবার for someone who's slowly becoming insulin resistant, the body is probably taking 2 hours for that same blood sugar control, and যেটা হওয়ার পরে the pancreas actually starts secreting more insulin to compensate. So দুটো জিনিস হয় ইনসুলিন রেজিস্ট্যান্সে, একটা তো ইনসুলিন কাজ করা কমে যায়, 2 নম্বর ইটস কল্ড হাইপার ইনসুলিনেমিয়া, মানে শরীরে সবসময় বেশি ইনসুলিন থাকে, and which in turn worsens the insulin resistance. So this is just a quick graphic. Insulin is supposed to go to a cell and it's supposed to draw the glucose energy into the cell. Ebar what happens in resistance, there's a blockage in this glucose intake. তো কি হয়, ব্লাড সুগার আস্তে আস্তে বাড়তে শুরু করে and insulin becomes less effective. So this is a quick example. এইগুলো যদি থাকে, you might get an insight as to whether you are insulin resistant. এখন insulin resistance এর সম্বন্ধে I tried to get some data. There is no concrete data in India or across the world that how many of us are insulin resistant. তার কারণ হচ্ছে insulin testing খুব কম হয়. But if you have any of these symptoms, repeated craving for sugar, খাওয়ার পরেই মনে হবে একটু বিছানায় শুই, body pain, lethargy, or something like dyslipidemia. Females might have PCOS আমরা জানি is so common among females. So these are signs you might be insulin resistant. I hope I was clear about the insulin resistance. আমি যতটা Okay, now these are certain medical conditions insulin resistance যদি থাকে হতে পারে, and you will see, like, you'll be amazed how many people we come across with these cardiac problems, neurological problems, gas, acidity, heartburn. এগুলো তো like আমাদের ইন্ডিয়ানদের like মানে most common symptom. I think 10 জন এলে 9 জন বলবে ডাক্তারবাবু একটু গ্যাস অ্যাসিডিটি হচ্ছে। So increased abdominal fat, ভুঁড়ি আমরা বাংলায় বলি, সবার থাকে। Raised blood sugar, hypertension are further consequences of being insulin resistant. এগুলো প্রথমেই হয় না। Triglycerides, liver issues, sleep apnea or too much snoring, এগুলো হয়। তারপর তো বললামই polycystic ovarian disease and HDL, low HDL. So these are the common consequences of being insulin resistant, and these are the medical conditions. You'll notice here in this slide, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. আমরা শুধু ভাবি fatty liver বা liver problems are associated with alcohol. You won't believe it. আমি 10টা পেশেন্টের আল্ট্রাসাউন্ড করতে দিলে আমি আমার limited clinical practice দেখেছি 7 show up with at least grade 1 fatty liver. The primary cause for grade 1 fatty liver or grade 2 fatty liver is, this is called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, is insulin resistance. So you can see ethebulo, and you'll see the mention of cataract. Since I'm talking to you, and this is a specialized eye center, so you are much better in a position than me to understand so many diabetics are having eye issues. So এই জিনিসগুলো probably we can reduce. আচ্ছা, why is insulin resistance not often diagnosed? আমি কেন বললাম যে ইনসুলিনের সম্বন্ধে আমাদের কোনো ডেটা বেশি নেই? Insulin test, hardly anyone does it. And it's got a very important role. The health sector usually follows a glucose-centric view. So everything's centered around blood sugar. Now, blood sugar high হয়ে গেল মানে diabetic. But there are so many people, I'd say number is much larger, যাদের blood sugar তখনও normal. So they might be in the pre-diabetic zone. And if we test their insulin, we find that they're already insulin resistant. So technically, insulin is a brilliant diagnostic tool to diagnose diabetes before it happens even. And then we can probably prevent it happening. Blood glucose is easier to measure than insulin. মানে blood glucose আমরা আঙুল ফুটিয়ে হয়ে যায়. Insulin is a bit more like difficult. Insulin resistance is not always a hyperglycemic state. তার মানে insulin resistance কারোর যদি হয়ে থাকে, that person may not have high blood sugar. So that's why most people just overlook it. And most medical professionals weren't taught this approach. Okay, now jumping into the interesting part, the illustrations and the food and the things that are going to make you salivate maybe. So, এখানে macronutrients, এখানে there are two types of nutrients, macronutrients and micro. Micro হচ্ছে vitamin minerals, ওইটা নিয়ে আমরা খুব ডিসকাশন আজকে করব না। Macronutrients এর মধ্যে সবাই শুনেছে there are three types: carbohydrates, proteins and fats, right? So you can just see a graphic image of what these actually indicate. এখানে কিছু কিছু overlapping থাকে. Some carbohydrates have some proteins have some fats. So I'll jump into these in more details. Acha. Don't worry too much about the graphical technicalities. What I simply want to say here is, there's an insulin বাড়ে বাইজো আমি কি বললাম ইনসুলিন রেজিস্ট্যান্স কখন হয় যদি আমাদের সারাক্ষণ বেশি ইনসুলিন সিক্রিশন হয় so if we're secreting too much insulin resistance happens, so we have to reduce our insulin secretion throughout the day. হ্যাঁ খাওয়ার সময় একটু ইনসুলিন তৈরি হবে, that is normal. So what food actually causes the most insulin spike? Usually carbohydrate rich food. এখানে carbohydrate rich food I'll get into details, but protein causes moderate insulin secretion. Fat, surprisingly, we've always villainized fat as the most dangerous types of food, but fat causes the least insulin spike by our pancreas. So in a way, fats could actually potentially be very healthy or not so dangerous as we thought them to be. So just keep this in mind. We'll require this information when we come back to the different types of foods and how they affect us. So the nutritional villain, এখানে carbohydrates সবচেয়ে বেশি insulin spike করছে. So based on the insulin resistance theory which I've already discussed, carbohydrates are a problem. So if you're a diabetic or even a pre-diabetic, carbohydrates are harmful. I'm not going to mince any words here. I'm not going to say না একটু খাওয়া যাবে. কারণ যদি সুগার হয়ে গিয়ে থাকে, you have to be very careful of carbohydrates. আরেকটা ব্যাপার, carbohydrates, this is a doctor, he's very popular related to carbohydrate addiction, Dr. Robert Spice. Carbohydrates, he says, carbohydrates are no longer used as a food. They have become a drug. So can you imagine, একজন বলছে carbohydrate is not a khaddo, it's a drug. We use in excess as a form of dysfunctional emotional management. আর কেন ইমোশনাল ম্যানেজমেন্ট? সুগার অ্যাডিকশন বলে there's something like it actually exists. People get addicted to sugar. যেই ব্রেস্ট ফিডিং হয়ে যায় একটা বাচ্চার, আমরা মা বাবারা কি দিয়ে দিই? ন্যান, পেডিয়াশিওর, ল্যাকটোজেন। কেন? হাজারটা ভিটামিন মিনারেল আছে। আপনি কি জানেন অমিতাভ দা আর কি আছে এইসব বেবি ফুডের মধ্যে?
বেবি ফুড গুলো আমি যতদূর জানি আর নট ভেরি হেলদি, মোস্ট অফ দেম। এইটুকু জানি, জানি না।
Absolutely right, you're absolutely right. মানে what happens in baby food is বড় বড় করে সামনের লেভেলে লেখা থাকে 5,000 10,000টা হয়তো ভিটামিন মিনারেল আছে, এগুলো দেখে মা বাবারা বাহ। But if you look at the reverse label and you see the nutritional breakdown, you see they're loaded with sugar. তো সুগার কেন দিচ্ছে একটা বাচ্চাকে? Remember, it's not for their nutritional benefit. এই কোম্পানিগুলো সুগার বাচ্চাদের দিচ্ছে to addict them. একটা বাচ্চাকে ব্রেস্ট মিল্ক আর বেবি ফুড দুটোই অপশন দিয়ে দেবেন, সে আর ব্রেস্ট মিল্কের দিকে তাকাবেও না, শুধু ওইটাই চাইবে। So that's when the addiction starts. A small example, this is a brilliant example which gets people to understand the gravity of sugar addiction. Okay, this is a person marooned in the desert. তো আপনি ভাবুন যে আপনার 5 দিন ধরে আপনি একটা ডেজার্টে মেরুন্ড, তো 5 দিন ধরে তো আপনি জল জুটছে না। আমি আপনাকে রেস্কিউ করে আনলাম, রেস্কিউ করার পর আমি আপনাকে 10 বোতল খাওয়ার জল দিলাম। ডান দিকের বোতলটা আমি এখন ডিসকাস করছি না, বাঁ দিকটা দেখুন। 10 বোতল খাওয়ার জল দিলাম, আপনি সাংঘাতিক থার্স্টি। তো এবার ভাবুন আপনি কটা বোতল খেতে পারবেন 10 লিটারের মধ্যে, আপনি ক বোতল খেতে পারবেন? জাস্ট গিভ মি আ গেস। ইউ আর সো থার্স্টি, ইউ হ্যাভেন্ট ড্রাঙ্ক ওয়াটার ফর মেবি 2 days। কটা বোতল খেতে পারবেন আপনি?
আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করছো?
হ্যাঁ,
I don't think, maybe at the most 1 bottle or less than that, তার বেশি কি করে খাবো।
So now imagine why I've given an example of beer. For someone who drinks beer, it is in the same form, liquid form. It occupies the same amount of volume in your stomach. So now ধরুন 4 ঘন্টা ধরে একটা বন্ধুদের সঙ্গে পার্টি হচ্ছে, আপনি তো নিশ্চয়ই 1 লিটারের বেশি বিয়ার খেয়ে নিতে পারবেন, 4-5টা বোতল তো কোনো ব্যাপার না। So why I give you this example is, জলটা is a food. I just have it until my thirst is satisfied. Tarpor a center in my brain, the thirst center, says no more water. I cannot have more. Tarpor ami jodi jol khete chai, I might vomit. But for the beer, it's the same liquid volume. It goes into my stomach, but it does not satisfy the thirst center. Brain ekta pleasure center ache. So beer satisfies the pleasure center in my brain, and that's why I can have a lot more of it. So ekhane what is that substance which we have as a necessity, jemon thirst? It is called a food. And what is that what we have for pleasure? We call it a drug. So that is why এই এক্সাম্পলের মাধ্যমে we can figure out that certain foods, especially carbohydrates, can potentially act as a drug. কিন্তু দেখুন কার্বোহাইড্রেট কিন্তু সবার জন্য খারাপ নয়, সিমিলারলি অ্যালকোহলও সবার জন্য খারাপ নয়। I call it a relationship problem. What I'm trying to say is, প্রচুর লোক আছে, মানে পেশেন্টস or healthy people যারা অ্যালকোহল খায়, they're absolutely fine, no problem. But if you give an alcoholic alcohol, it's a disaster for that person. So it's the relationship that person has with alcohol. So carbohydrates are not the problem per se. It's the relationship we share with it which might become a problem. So now coming to the solution, what can we do? Now, this will go against, a lot of people who are in the industry. I've always faced a lot of obstacles as I've done this. But let's look at what the experts advise. Quick recap, carbohydrate is a problem যদি কারো ডায়াবেটিস থাকে, আর যদি ওভার কনজাম্পশন অফ কার্বোহাইড্রেট হয় তাহলে you may become a diabetic or a pre-diabetic. So now look at this, ICMR. We've all heard of ICMR again because of COVID. ICMR is going on, guiding us, giving us guidelines. So this is taken from the ICMR booklet of nutrition requirements for Indians. Look at the top few markers: cereals, pulses, fruits. All of these are carbohydrate rich. So if you look here, the total calories from these foods, look at the amount. Now I'm just going to the next slide. It will become easier for you to understand. It's just a continuation of this book. I've marked some things in red. Carbohydrates are under leakage. The quantity and quality of carbohydrates are important to maintain good health and have been indicated substantially to impact nutrition-related chronic disorders. For the first time, recommendations have been made for the dietary intake of carbohydrates. Mane, ear again, no one had any recommendations for carbs. A minimum intake of 100 to 130 grams of carbohydrates per day should be ensured for ages 1 year and above, not even for an adult. ছোটবেলা থেকে বলছে 100 থেকে 130 গ্রাম কার্বোহাইড্রেটস পার ডে খাওয়ানো উচিত। আর এখানে নোট this level is the minimum required for brain glucose utilization. I'm sorry to say this, whoever has written this does not understand how our body makes and utilizes glucose. Okay? What India eats, again from the same booklet. So if you see this plate, সবজি ফল এসব তো প্রচুর আছে, a large part of it is cereals. Now cereals, urban India, rural India has a lot of cereals. So cereals are basically carbohydrates. Now look at this. Calories and protein from different food groups. If you notice here, you see the carbohydrate, একদম last column টা দেখুন একবার. Carbohydrates from each food group. Cereals এর থেকেই we are eating an average of 182 grams of carbohydrates per day. ঠিক আছে? So তার মধ্যে pulses, vegetables, fruits, এগুলো are also carbohydrates. So if you look at the total, it's 282, কিন্তু probably 200 grams per day. Just note this value in mind. আমরা প্রায় 200 grams of carbohydrates per day খাচ্ছি. This is another elaboration of that. This is urban India. Urban India is having almost 80 to 90 grams of carbohydrates. Sorry, ভুল বলেছি. Intake is 293 grams of carbohydrates. Okay. Now, if you look at this slide, this is rural India. Rural India কিন্তু প্রচুর carbohydrates খাচ্ছে. It's understandable for their socio-economic reasons. ওরা হয়তো এত মাছ মাংস ডিম খেতে পারে না. And এখানে just look, don't get into the details. This dark blue section is basically the amount of carbohydrates we are eating on a daily basis. If you look at the lower right slide, the box, ekdam dan diketa. The first one talks about the recommendation. The government says you should be having around 40 grams of carbohydrate. 40% of your intake should be from carbohydrates. Urban India is taking 51. Rural India is taking 65. So we are over consuming carbohydrates by that much. Remember, carbohydrates কি করছে? Too much insulin secretion করাচ্ছে. Just talking about our side of India, Eastern India, carbohydrate intake is 323.4 grams per day. This is the pooled average in urban India. So মানে মারাত্মক লেভেলে খুব হাই কার্বোহাইড্রেট ইনটেক হচ্ছে 300 এর উপর. And because of this, the prevalence of diabetes, overall prevalence of diabetes was 25.4% in urban and 7.4% in rural India. But that rural count is actually growing. So the blue markers are all showing urban, orange is showing rural. These are prevalence of diabetes among adults by region. So you can see like all over the country, it's a major worry now. এরকম rate diabetes বাড়ছে. And this is also hypertension. Hypertension and diabetes actually go hand in hand to an extent. So I just talked about that as well. And this is the guidelines, specific guidelines by the ICMR, যে বাচ্চা আর বড়দের কেমন খাওয়া উচিত. So if you see, 6 to 8 months kid, he's asked to start off with rice and dal. Okay. Then some apple. তারপর হচ্ছে some wheat, rajma. And around 1 বছরের বাচ্চাকে বলা হয় again rice and dal, mashed apple and khichdi made of wheat and all. So carbohydrate ভরিয়ে দিচ্ছে. And remember that earlier slide, children are turning up with diabetes at an alarming rate. Okay, this is the daily menu for sedentary women. So it's carbohydrates everywhere you look, be it cereals, be it fruits, and for the sedentary man it's more or less the same thing. So this is what the experts are saying. এইভাবে আমাদের খাওয়া উচিত. And this is again going to the UNO, United Nations. They have a guideline on their page specific for India. If you see the underlined part, eat plenty of vegetables and fruits. So fruit is actually a very high carbohydrate food. Amra fruit khai bhebe je hai healthy, okay, but fruits contain a lot of hidden carbohydrates in the form of fructose. And minimum use of ghee, butter. So remember I just told you, fat has been villainized. There is no evidence showing that fat can actually harm you if it's the right kind of healthy fat. And এখানে আরেকটা, exercise regularly and be physically active. Exercise, আপনিও তো প্রচুর exercise করেন. At your age, it's commendable the way you kind of exercise you do at your age. So exercise we all do for a lot of benefits. Exercise definitely benefits আছে. কিন্তু আমার মনে হয় exercise has nothing to do with diabetes. Remember my three marathon runners who became diabetic. So exercise has other benefits. It does not help diabetes. In fact, ICMR has an app as well. So everyone can install that app and follow these advices of excess carbohydrates. Now quickly seeing this. It's called the food pyramid. The lower part is bigger. The top part is narrower. So তার মানে this is a way to depict that you should eat more what at the bottom, and as we go up the pyramid কম। So নিচের দিকে কি আছে? সিরিয়াল, আলু, সবজি, fruits। ওপর দিকে যত যাই মাছ, মাংস, ডিম and oils। This is the conventional dietary advice. So what needs to be done? We need to change the food pyramid, and funnily we do exactly opposite of what we've been told, and that's what I've been doing for the last 4-5 years. On the left is the old diabetes food pyramid. So again, nicher dike prochur cereal, bread, biscuit, veggies, fruits. New diabetes food pyramid, the vegetables remain at the bottom, but the non-starchy vegetables. As we go up, you'll see there's a lot of fish, chicken, cheese, egg, all the things we thought that are not that healthy. And as we go up, then the small amounts of starchy vegetables are tartar, things like chocolate, biscuits, they're at the very bottom. So in general, I call it a low carbohydrate, high fat or healthy fat diet. This is all you need to fix your diabetes.
Interesting.
So again, this is just a pictorial depiction of what a low carb, high or healthy fat food shows in the restructured pyramid. নিচের দিকে বাটার, ঘি, চিকেন, ডিম এইগুলো amply খাওয়া যায়। Reduce your amount of vegetables, reduce your amount of fruits even more, and of course we should not be even looking at things like cereals and grains and rice and dal, provided you are diabetic. Not for everyone. There are also hidden carbs. গত সপ্তাহে আমার শাশুড়ি আমাকে এই চকলেটটা দিয়েছে। So my mother-in-law knows, I'm very careful about my health. So she gave this saying it's sugar-free and it's the dark chocolate. Look at this label, যেখানে arrowটা point করছে। Total carbohydrates 59 grams per 100 grams of this. So তার মানেটা হচ্ছে it is claiming to be sugar-free, but the standard rule of thumb is if you are a diabetic, you should not be, মানে কোনো খাবারে যদি দেখেন that 100 gram of that serving এর মধ্যে there are more than 20 grams of carbohydrate, you should know that you should let it pass. So এখানে this supposed healthy chocolate এর মধ্যে close to 60 grams of carbohydrates. মোট কথা 60 grams of carbohydrate মানে once you digest it, it turns into blood sugar. Turns into blood sugar মানে it spikes your insulin, মানে again the same problem. Remember, recap, too much carbohydrates causes too much insulin. Too much insulin will eventually make you diabetic. But aren't carbohydrates essential? That's what most people tell me. A lot of my doctor colleagues বলেন যে carbohydrates তো আমাদের লাগবে, আমাদের ব্রেনে লাগে, আমাদের মাইটোকন্ড্রিয়াতে লাগে। But look at this. The myth is carbohydrates are essential in the diet. Fact is there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. All the doctors listening and আপনিও মনে পড়বে that আমাদের কিন্তু ডাক্তারি বইতে লেখা ছিল there are essential fatty acids মানে fat, there are essential amino acids মানে essential মানে না খেলে আমরা মরে যাব। 2 number essential মানে we have to source it via the food. We've never read about an essential carbohydrate, and the body is remarkably capable of making any glucose you need from protein and fat. So orally আমাদের কিন্তু carbohydrate লাগবে। National Institute of Health Dietary References says the lower limit of dietary carbohydrate compatible with life apparently is 0. So আমাদের কিন্তু খাদ্যের মধ্যে কোনো carbohydrate as such প্রয়োজন নেই। And look at this, I'll just go down to the last part. Endogenous glucose production rate মানে আমাদের শরীর কতটা গ্লুকোজ তৈরি করতে পারে। It is around 2.8 to 3.6 grams per kilogram per day মানে একটা 70 কিলোর adult male এর মধ্যে the body is capable of producing 200 থেকে 270 grams of carbohydrate glucose per day. So that's more than enough for our requirements. আমরা যদি এক ফোঁটাও কার্ব না খাই from protein and fat, our liver can make glucose by the form of gluconeogenesis.
এটা কিসের থেকে তৈরি করছে? From the ingested protein and fat, right?
Yeah. First is protein. Protein is used by the liver. The liver goes through a process called gluconeogenesis. তো যখনই আমাদের ব্রেনের around 10 to 15% of our brain requires glucose. তো যখনই সেটা লাগে, the body just converts this protein into glucose and feeds our brain with it. তো আমাদের খাবারের মধ্যে কিন্তু কোনো কার্বোহাইড্রেটের প্রয়োজন নেই। Biggest myths ever. Now this is interesting. You'll all find this very funny. breakfast is the healthiest meal of the day. এটা কে বলেছিল? Mr. Kellogg. Anyone remember someone called Kellogg? It's flooded our market. 1913, 1930, I'm not very sure. This was the first advertisement by Kellogg. They started promoting this tagline, breakfast is the healthiest meal of the day. কেন জানেন? যাতে ওদের বিক্রি হয়। সবাই কর্নফ্লেক্স খাবে সকালে উঠে। There's no scientific basis, and we Indians are not also scared. This is the very latest advertisement, India advertisement, for getting something. 12% of urban Indians forget to meet their nutrient needs due to inadequate breakfast. So this is how Kellogg's is or has been misleading us that breakfast is very important. It's simple math. Feeding a diabetic a diet of sugar and then giving them drugs, lower sugar, is not logical. Insulin to fat storage trigger করতে, carbohydrates trigger insulin. So do the maths yourself. We don't want any food which is causing too much secretion of insulin. আচ্ছা, কার্বস এন্ড সুইটস এতটাই ইনগ্রেইনড আমাদের কালচারের মধ্যে যে আমরা একটা সুন্দরী মেয়েকে দেখলে আমরা কি বলি? কি মিষ্টি মেয়েটা। আমরা তো কখনো বলি না কি সল্টি বা কি নোনতা। So মিষ্টি মানে অটোমেটিকলি ভালো, দ্যাট ইজ ইনগ্রেইনড ইন আওয়ার মাইন্ড। সো এই যে কোনো সেলিব্রেশন হলে মিষ্টি, কেউ তো মাছ মাংস বাই ডিফল্ট খাওয়াবে না, সবজি খাওয়াবে না, আগে মিষ্টি খাওয়াবে। So this whole sweet thing is ingrained and we think it is good. So think about it. If there is a health food section in the grocery store, what does that make the rest of the food sold there? You have your answer. The rest is all unhealthy. And some misleading labels. যখনই বাজারে যাবেন, এটা by the way, health food section. Fat free, fat free, fat free. So যে health conscious সে কিন্তু fat free দিকে reach করবে. The funny thing about this is fat is not the culprit, and এই fat free খাবারের মধ্যে to mimic the taste of something which has fat, they have to add sugar. So এর পিছনের লেভেলগুলো যদি কখনো ঘুরিয়ে দেখবেন, remember I taught you nutritional labels, carbs যদি more than 20% থাকে, let it go. All of these low fat food. Acha, hospitals and school food counters look like this. This I had to sneak into a hospital, a big corporate hospital in Calcutta, by the way. I'm not taking any names here. And this was all the food being given to the patients and to the staff. So brownies, muffins, pastries, patties, all full of carbohydrates. Each of these have 60 to 80% of carbohydrates in them. So we are not helping anyone either. So if you're diabetic, try sticking to under approximately 50 grams a day. And if you don't want to become a diabetic, do the same. 50 grams is a safe margin.
That's carbohydrate you're talking about, right?
Yeah. I'm just running through this slide now. A quick example of per 100 grams of any serving, some examples. মানে এখানে কয়েকটা ভ্যালু দেখবেন। These means এই খাবারটার per 100 grams এর মধ্যে এতটা কার্বোহাইড্রেট। আমি বলেছি per day not more than 50. একটু পটেটো চিপস খেলে 50, চকলেট বার 60, okay, grapes 16, banana 20. So cola is not bad, but if you have too many bananas, you're crossing your daily limit of 50. And remember, this is primarily for a diabetic. So see, potatoes 50, bread 46. কয়েক slice bread খেলে you're over your daily limit, and রোজ খেলে you're heading towards diabetes. This is an interesting example. Opore 20 grams of carbohydrates looks like that. One piece of bread, এইটুকু ভাত। আমরা তো গাদা গুচ্ছে ভাত খাই, স্পেশালি আমরা বাঙালিরা। এইটুকু ভাত খেলে you're touching 20. তো আমরা যে অ্যামাউন্টে ভাত খাই, we're easily touching 100 grams of carbs just from rice. তারপর তো বাকি খাবার রইল। This is some examples of fruits and veggies. You see, bottom right, the probably healthiest fruits are some berries, মানে 5 বা 6 গ্রাম per 100 গ্রাম। But কলায় 20, mango 13, pineapple 12, grapes 16. So fruits are okay. I call fruits nature's candy once in a while. Cereals, এটা তো Indians is our staple diet. Lentil মানে ডাল. Quinoa is a fancy food taken by a lot of health freaks, but quinoa actually has a lot of carbs in it. So you be careful there as well. Haha, everyone will be smiling seeing this slide. Alcohol. So whiskey, wine, and vodka, they are in generally safe. They have very little carbs. But the moment you start moving towards beer, it's 13 grams of carbohydrates per glass. Okay, so be careful with your alcohol as well. These are some more other drinks. So the healthiest water is obviously like water, কোনো carbs নেই. লাল চা, black coffee, এগুলোতেও কোনো carbs নেই. So other than that, be careful of your beverages. Recreational purpose fine, not too often. Butter and things like olive oil, coconut oil, these are very healthy fats in fact. So এগুলো একদম insulin spike করায় না. Obviously, I told you at the beginning, they do not cause clogged arteries. So these are very good oils. And just see this, like a tomato ketchup at 26. So আমরা তো tomato sauce regularly সবকিছুর সঙ্গে খাই. You're just loading sugar. And look at the good meats now, the good protein. Eggs are 1 gram. Other meats have 2 to 3 grams. Cheese has 2 grams. So all those things we thought which were unhealthy, they actually do not spike insulin. And some more. So how can you fix your diabetes? This is another way. First solution, have less carbs. Now this is a second option, another trick up our sleeves, how we can fix diabetes without doing anything at all. The magic pill is called fasting or time restricted eating. আমি কিছু না করেই যদি আমার ডায়াবেটিস ঠিক করতে পারি, আমি 5টা ওষুধ খাবো কেন, ইনজেকশন ফোটাবো কেন, ডাক্তারের কাছে কেন যাবো? আমি যদি কম খাওয়াতে আমার ডায়াবেটিস ঠিক হয়ে যায়। So কম খাওয়া বলতে it's not amount, quantity of food is not important. Just make sure you're eating less often, because if you're eating less often, you're causing less insulin spikes. See this graph, very simple, traditional 3 meal a day eating. The red indicates your insulin spike. কিছু খাওয়ার পর blood sugar বাড়লে, insulin বাড়লে. And the green part shows the fat burning phase when you're not eating anything. তো দিনে 3 বার খেলে কি হচ্ছে? 3 বার insulin secretion হচ্ছে, আর এই green phase এ যাওয়ার চান্সই কমে যাচ্ছে। 8-hour eating window, আমরা যদি দিনে 8 ঘন্টার মধ্যে খাই, ওই 2 বার রেড ইনসুলিন স্পাইক হলো, কিন্তু বাকি 16 ঘন্টা আমার কিন্তু ইনসুলিন কম। তো ইনসুলিন যত কম থাকে, slowly your bodies get more insulin sensitive and respond better to insulin, your endogenous pancreatic insulin. So then you start getting less dependent on medicine. So this just shows if you're having too much carbs, insulin spike কিরকম হচ্ছে, আর এদিকে হচ্ছে if you are not eating, you are in the green phase, which is causing lower insulin and better sensitivity. Okay, just I have a few more slides remaining. Just like that. So, Andavada, was I more or less clear?
Yeah, your message is very clear. আমার দু একটা কোয়েশ্চেন আছে, আমি বলছি।
I'll just
তুমি
take 2 more
finish
minutes.
your conversation.
2-3 মিনিট লাগবে, তারপর we can
হ্যাঁ।
Okay, again talking about the pandemic. I already showed this slide. The real pandemic is metabolic disease and chronic disease, so we have to fix that. So COVID, এখন তো COVID ছাড়া there's no other hot topic of discussion. So
Correct.
COVID, আমরা জানি that আমার যদি immunity better than another person, there's less chance of me being affected badly by COVID, right? So COVID immunity আর insulin resistance এর সঙ্গে there's a huge and very important link. তো এতক্ষণ তো আমি বলে গেলাম ডায়াবেটিস এর ব্যাপারে, but if you can fix your insulin resistance, you can actually become better with your immunity, and in a way you can protect yourself from not only COVID, a host of other pathogens out there. So look at these. There are already a lot of studies which have come up by NHS, by Oxford, which say people with diabetes are up to 3.5 times more at risk from COVID. That's a huge number.
We know this, yes.
Yes, আপনারা তো দেখছেন on a daily basis. People with diabetes appear to be at an increased risk of having more severe COVID infection.
Correct.
And এখানে দেখুন specific insulin resistance নিয়ে একটা স্টাডি হয়েছে, association of insulin resistance with severity and mortality of COVID-19. So it's not just diabetes. ডায়াবেটিস তো পরে হয়, ইনসুলিন রেজিস্ট্যান্স আগে হয়। ইনসুলিন রেজিস্ট্যান্স আমরা দেখেছি 5-7 বছর যদি কেউ ইনসুলিন রেজিস্ট্যান্স হয়, they will eventually become a diabetic. So if you're insulin resistant but not a diabetic, you still are at more risk. আর এখানেও metabolic syndrome, obesity, the impact on immunity. So all of this is just an effort by me to make healthier individuals. So you are more protected from viruses. And now for some hard evidence. আপনাদের যদি মনে হয় ডক্টর ভট্টাচার্যের কথা বিশ্বাস করবেন না, so that's why I had to get some evidence. আমি যদি 10টা পেশেন্টের ডায়াবেটিস রিভার্স করিয়ে দিই, it is not considered as hard medical evidence. Okay. So the only way we can do it is via something called a clinical trial. মানে আমাকে 1000টা পেশেন্ট নিতে হবে, I have to split them into two groups. 500 জনকে রেগুলার খাওয়ালাম, বাকি 500 জনকে আমার মতো খাওয়ালাম, when what I feel is going to help their diabetes. Once I publish these results, it is considered as scientific medical evidence. So Verta is a remarkable company. Remember, এইরকম clinical trials are very expensive. So obviously it's not possible for everyone to do. Verta has been doing this trial for over 2 years now. Long-term effect on continuous remote care intervention, including nutritional ketosis. Nutritional ketosis is just what happens when you go on a low-carb, high-fat diet. For the management of type 2 diabetes, a 2-year non-randomized clinical trial করেছে. So এখানে, look at this. The Verta treatment, clinically proven type 2 diabetes reversal result after 1 year. Now just look at the magical figure. 60% of patients have reversed their type 2 diabetes. 94% of insulin users reduced or even stopped insulin. My father-in-law was the first patient of mine many years ago. He used to take 64 units of insulin. He had diabetic neuropathy. In 6 months, he was off his insulin. And now he exercises just like you and me. And he's 70 years old. And average drop in HbA1c হচ্ছে যেটা 3 মাসের blood sugar average দেখায়, 1.3% drop, only 1 বছরে. Now the trial is crossed 2 years, so you can understand how the benefit. This is 1.3% drop in HbA1c. Diabetic medication use has reduced by 48% compared to usual care. Usual care কি হয়েছে 9% বেড়ে চলেছে, ডায়াবেটিসের ওষুধ বাড়তেই থাকে. That's the problem. Body weight 30 pounds, মানে প্রায় 12 কিলো কমেছে. Triglycerides কমেছে. Inflammation in the body has reduced. So multiple benefits if you go on this kind of food. Okay. And is there hope? Now finally, before we close discussion, আমার বলাতে এরকম অনেক ডাক্তার এখন আছে পৃথিবী, like around the world, who are trying to promote and talk about this better way of reversing a chronic disease. But this animation or drawing just shows there's always a big line in front of a hospital where there's pills and surgery. Lifestyle change, আমাদের মতো practice chamber ফাঁকা থাকে. So is there hope? There is hope actually. It's happening very slowly, very, very slowly. But the more people I can convince, or the more people I can make aware, it's victory for me. So Times magazine, a very famous magazine, 1984, their cover story was cholesterol and now the bad news. Chobite deem and some bacon item. That same magazine, after so many years, they are telling us to eat butter. Scientists had labeled fat the enemy. Were they wrong? So there is things happening. It's taking a lot of time. So a big thank you, Amitabha, and your lovely team at Shunitra Family Eye Care Center for giving me this brilliant opportunity to spread the message of better health.
Thank you. It was an eye opener. আমার দু একটা questions আছে.
একদম প্লিজ.
আচ্ছা, স্লাইড সেটটাকে রিমুভ করে দিই।
আমি করে দিচ্ছি, হয়ে গেছে।
তো তোমার একটা মেসেজ যেটা আমি বুঝলাম যে fewer number of meals per day is good, তাই তো? আমার যেটুকু অল্প জেনারেল নলেজ আছে, আমাদের দেশে মানে হাজার হাজার বছর আগে মুনি ঋষিরা অল্পই খেতেন এবং দিনে কমই খেতেন. So maybe yes, that had some scientific basis. তো 16 ঘন্টা ফাস্টিং যেটা বলছো, যে ইন্টারমিটেন্ট ফাস্টিং, yes, that is good. আমি নিজে প্র্যাকটিস করি, সুতরাং আমি জানি যে it is how healthy one feels.
You're one of the fittest doctors I've seen, by the way. at your age.
এবারে দুটো দুটো মিল কিরকম টাইমে খাওয়া উচিত, কিরকম গ্যাপে খাওয়া উচিত, যদি 16 ঘন্টা কেউ
মানুষরা হিউম্যান স্পিসিস, আমরা উই আর দ্য মোস্ট আনহেলদি স্পিসিস। হ্যাঁ, আমাদের এখানে সবচেয়ে বেশি বুদ্ধি আছে, বাট উই আর স্টিল দ্য মোস্ট আনহেলদি স্পিসিস। কেন জানেন? আমরা ঘড়ি দেখে খাই। দিস ইজ দ্য প্রবলেম। একটা জঙ্গলে একটা বাঘ বা চিতা ঘড়ি দেখে খায় না। ওরা কখন খায়? যখন খিদে পায়, আর নাহলে যখন খাবার জোটে। দে হ্যাভ টু ওয়ার্ক ফর দেয়ার ফুড এজ ওয়েল। ওদের তো সুইগি জোম্যাটো নেই। বাট we should all follow our hunger signals. Remember, breakfast is not the most healthy food of the day. So you can aram se skip breakfast. Even this goes out to all the parents. The child is not hungry, do not have to bother. Let them experience the joy of hunger. Hunger is a very interesting joy which many of us fail to experience. So wait till you're hungry. When you're hungry, eat till satisfaction, satiety. Paid bhore khawa, প্রপার খাবারগুলো খাওয়া। কার্বোহাইড্রেট হ্যাঁ খাওয়া তো যাই, ইফ ইউ ডোন্ট হ্যাভ এনি মেটাবলিক কন্ডিশন কম খাবেন, বিকজ বেশি বেশি যদি খান কার্বোহাইড্রেট ইউ আর গোইং টু ইভেন্চুয়ালি ফল আনওয়েল। সো হ্যাভ মডারেট কার্বোহাইড্রেটস, হ্যাভ গুড প্রোটিনস, হ্যাভ গুড ফ্যাটস, ঠিক আছে? অ্যান্ড কবার খাওয়া উচিত? ইউজুয়ালি আমি দেখি if someone is of prime health, they can eat 3 times a day. But usually I work with a lot of sports persons and athletes as well. I see that a 2-meal plan is that perfect balance. আর একটা জিনিস মনে রাখবেন, কমবার খেলে খাওয়ার ব্যাপারে চিন্তাই করতে হয় না। ইউ ডোন্ট হ্যাভ টু বদার অ্যাবাউট ফুড, কি আছে, কি রান্না করবো, কি ফ্রিজ থেকে বার করবো। ইউ সেভ দ্যাট টাইম, ইউ ক্যান ডু সামথিং, ইউ ক্যান টেক আ ন্যাপ, ইউ ক্যান রিড আ বুক, ইউ ক্যান লিসেন টু মিউজিক, ইউ ক্যান ওয়ার্ক আউট। তো কমবার খেলে ইউ সেভ মোর টাইম as well. So eat when hungry. A 2 meal a day works fine. Now for a diabetic, a word of caution: if you're a diabetic, don't jump into this intermittent fasting. Don't jump into just low carb all of a sudden. তাহলে কি হবে? আপনাদের যদি ডায়াবেটিস থাকে, আপনারা ওষুধ খাচ্ছেন, তো এইদিকে you make a change in your food. So for some people, as early as 2 weeks, you have correction in your insulin level. মানে insulin resistance starts reversing as early as 2 weeks. তো সেটা যদি হতে শুরু করে and you're still on your diabetes medicine, you risk hypoglycemia, blood sugar বেশি ফল করে যেতে পারে। If you're a diabetic, my request is go to any doctor who's experienced on this way of medicine and do it under his guidance for at least a few months. 3-4 মাসের মধ্যে, আমি তো আমার পেশেন্টদের বলি 6 মাস পর I don't want to see your face as a patient. আড্ডা মারতে চাইলে আসবে। After 6 months, my job is to teach you in that time how to lead your life, so you do not need me anymore. So that's basically what I want to say.
Thank you. Excellent, Parikshit. I think your talk has been an eye-opener, and I hope that many diabetics and people with chronic diseases, and even mothers, parents, I have seen n number of mothers within our own family and relatives and friends who keep on coaxing the small children, kha, 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 kha.
Just give me 30 seconds. Since you said this, on Mone I started laughing. I'll tell you why. I did not include it in the slide. I thought it was too funny, but let me just show you on the screen. এই যে বাচ্চাদের কি বলে, খা 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 খা, তাই তো?
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Correct.
পুরো ফোন রিচার্জ হওয়ার পরে আমরা চার্জে লাগিয়ে থাকি, তো সেটাই বাচ্চাদের করা হচ্ছে। So
Yeah.
do not overfeed. Food is the primary reason for so many problems. So just একটা জিনিস মনে রাখবেন, কম খেলে সুস্থ থাকবেন, বেশি খেলে অসুস্থ হবেন। As simple as that.
Absolutely. Great, Parikshit. I hope more patients will meet you and
thank you so much for
the guidance from you and benefit in their lives. Thank you very much. Thanks once again for sparing the time, being with us. God bless you, and God bless you.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone as well.
We'll call it a day, and we'll end this broadcast for today. Okay?
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.